with some of the usual suspects, the Jessup brothers and Brad Carpenter. They've all brought the same 75 to the table this weekend. Some 2-1s on the squad, but so far things are so good for Frank Skarren as he's off to a 3-0, going for the 4. And he is on the play. There's a basic island. There's a Terramander.
Yeah, Terramander, one of the newer additions to this Is It Drake's decks that's honestly been super impressive. It becomes a 5/5 flyer very quickly, and most of these decks already play 4 copies of Chart a Course, but the addition of this 1-mana threat really turbo powers those Chart a Courses early in the game, acting as a 2-mana draw too.
Slower start for Brady, just a tapped Temple Garden, and we're back to Skarren. Second basic island, no sign of red mana just yet. We'll see how he gets set up. Pre-combat Chart a Course.
Now this is really interesting. Frank valuing getting an extra instant sorcerer into his graveyard here. Discarding that Lava Coil almost preemptively. Must know that his boy Hal Brady on the other side of things is playing that Bat Nexus deck.
Yeah, attack for 1, Brady to 19. Frequently you do see Chart a Course without attacking when you're playing Arclight Phoenix, so this is a Drake-heavy build.
Right, and that extra instant or sorcery in the graveyard here could be really important, not for just pumping that Terramander, but also something in the future like an Enigma or Crackling Drake.
Turn 2 play for Brady was an island into search for Escanta, so now he's getting kind of set up. As we go back to Skarren, he'll start the turn with the Discovery. Looks at a couple cards, another Lava Coil hitting the bin, and Enigma Drake will hit as well. He'll draw off the Discovery. Another attack for 1 with the Terramander, Brady going to 18. We'll see if there is red mana or even any kind of third land for Skarren from here.
No, and it looks like he missed there. Digging for that third land and that red mana source.
Yeah, I like the way he's played it so far, but eventually missing land drops will catch up with you. On Brady's side, Glacial Fortress. No additional action, though. The deck's a little bit slow to get started. Turn 4 is when you start to look for some fireworks. We go back to Frank Skarren. Once again, leading with Discovery. Still looking for that third land drop.
Interestingly enough, if he goes, if the top 2 cards are both instant sorceries, that'll be instants and sorcery 6 and 7, and if he draws a blue source off the top, he can activate that Terramander. But Ben's 2 creatures just desperately digging for that land and can't find it.
Yep, Crackling Drake, Enigma Drake hit the bin. Another attack for 1, Brady to 17, but not seeing that land.
No, and if you're Hal Brady playing this Bat Nexus deck, this is exactly where you want to be in this matchup. Your opponent just kind of floundering, not putting very much pressure on you, and we're really seeing the effects of playing such a low land count from this Is It Drake's deck.
Couple end-step ops for Brady, one to the top, one to the bottom, and that pushes him a little bit closer to transforming that search for Escanta. He's doing all right for himself. The Escanta trigger will put a breeding pool in the graveyard, and he'll draw for turn. Hinterland harbors the land. Does he have the reclamation? He does. He is online, untaps his 4 lands.
And you're going to see just how powerful Wilderness Reclamation is here as a means of just generating a bunch of extra mana. It's essentially free the first turn you cast it, which I think a lot of people just don't really get that aspect of the card, and why many people still don't think it's one of the best cards in Standard.
Yeah, once it gets going, it can be so demoralizing being on the other side of the table, in particular once Escanta the Sunken Rune is transformed.
Right. On top of that, though, just being able to play these modal spells like Depose Deploy. Here, Hal Brady could just cast the back half of Depose Deploy and make 2 Thopters and eat that Terramander, since Frank Skarren is just a little bit short of being able to activate it.
Well, third land has finally shown up. Basic Mountain was added and a pre-combat opt before he gets to work.
Sorry, that looks like that is the 6th instant in the graveyard there with that opt, so can potentially activate this Terramander for just 2 mana. Spoke too soon.
Let's see if he wants to do that. Getting the Terramander large will speed up the clock, though. Remember, this Bat Nexus deck, as you can see using the Cardboard Live extension, is packing a bunch of Root Snares.
Yeah, Root Snare is effectively a 2-mana fog. It can prevent a bunch of damage that's dealt to you. But it looks like here we're going to go for a 4-mana deploy from Hal Brady. Make 2 Thopters, gain 2 life.
Yeah, bumps him into 19, and here's the blockers. He'll put 1 in front of the Terramander. It's either going to put that in the bin or force some action from Skarren.
Yeah, I think Skarren's going to actually shock the other Thopter to use his mana efficiently, and then use 1 mana left over with 7 instant sorcery in the graveyard now to pump that Terramander. We're going to do a quick double check. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect.
Yeah, good sequencing, but now we get to check to see if it matters, as we see Brady untapping with that Reclamation. He will not be transforming the Search for Escanta just yet. No response to the trigger, draws the card, so still needs a couple more there, but he is going to be going to work with that Wilderness Reclamation now.
Yeah, and this Wilderness Reclamation really going to start to show off what it can do once the Escanta is transformed, but even before then, how Brady with a Chemist's Insight in hand can just use that 4 mana here, cast it, instead just goes for Nexus
Basic
of Fate.
Swamp.
Yes.
Oh, Nexus of Fate,
Yes.
sorry.
Okay, I don't want to go on a long Nexus of Fate rant. Y'all have heard me complain about it enough. I'll just say this. Any card that only shows up in Standard in foil, or anyway, only shows up in tournaments in foil and requires a Judge Proxy in order to be legal should not be a Magic card.
Yeah.
Just shouldn't be a Magic card. I'm going to leave it at that. On Magic Arena, there's literally no way to break your opponent casting it over and over again with no win conditions in their deck.
So you're telling me that it does not spark joy?
No, Marie Kondo, please. Burn it to the ground.
How Brady going to really go to work now? He's on his extra Nexus turn.
He's doing the Caleb Scher impression. I hate it.
Been to land with the Search, ever closer to transforming to the Sunken Rune. Floating a bunch of mana here, 3 blue, a white, and a green. He'll untap with that Wilderness Reclamation.
Thanks, dude. Keeping us... Ugh. I love Wilderness Reclamation, but I hate Nexus of Fate. I don't... just stop.
This is the kind of stuff that I refuse to play with Commander players if these cards are in their deck. As we see another basic Swamp for Hale Brady, that's a Nexus of Fate. More turns. I was doing the spotting for Joe Lissette's round 1 match, and he had a little piece of paper to mark extra turns. I didn't get to ask him what the high score was. We currently have 1 in the queue for Hale Brady. And there's a Revitalize. Gain 3 life there to 22.
Yeah, and with the extra turn kind of floating, we're going to see this Escanta transform. And as long as he hits these land drops, he's going to be able to activate Escanta, find that Nexus of Fate pretty quickly. And even if he misses, he's at 22 life thanks to the Deposed Deploy, the Revitalize, and the very weak start from Frank Skarren. So even if Frank is able to get a foothold at some point in this game, chances are it's not going to be nearly enough.
And there's an activation of the Sunken Rune. Had a choice of a couple Root Snares and another Revitalize. Takes the Fog effect, puts that in the hand. And once Escanta has transformed and you have 1 Reclamation going, you're sitting pretty. You know, you get to get some extra cards, have an abundance of mana to work with. A second Wilderness Reclamation makes this just disgusting.
Right, you get to activate the Escanta usually 2 or 3 times in a single turn, as well as occasionally cast the Nexus of Fate somewhere in the middle there. Here we're going to see a tapped land from Hal Brady, as well as a bit of a floating at the end step, and he's going to look for another Wilderness Reclamation, which he finds. Doesn't quite have that other Nexus of Fate, I don't believe, but, you know, they're all swamps, so I would just be confused and think they were swamps in his hand.
And the players know about that Root Snare that Brady picked up, and he's at 22, just very firmly in the driver's seat here.
I have no real way in my head where Frank Skarren can claw himself back into this game. The 2 copies of Root Snare in Brady's hand mean that any big chunks of damage that Enigma Drake or Crackling Drake can do are going to effectively be nullified. And once he gets that second copy of Wilderness Reclamation online, I think we're going to see Frank Skarren pick him up here quite soon. Unfortunately for Hal Brady, though, Frank Skarren does have multiple copies of Negate in his main deck as a means of potentially protecting from something like that. So we'll see if he has it, and we'll see if he goes for it.
Terramander knocked Brady to 17. Follow up. Skarren has a 4th land. It's Mountain. Here's Crackling Drake. So reasonable amount of power here, but Brady not yet incentivized to use his Root Snare. Just fires off an instant Chemist's Insight. That found another Nexus of Fate. We know that he has that second Wilderness Reclamation. He might be able to win on this series of course of turns that he takes without giving Skarren any turns.
If you've heard me rant about Karkline Ironworks before, you have heard me use the term time thief. In a match of Magic, both players roughly should take about the same amount of time in a given match, but some decks are a little more time thiefy than others. But occasionally there comes a deck that does it way more egregiously than any other deck. Ironworks was one of those. We saw the deck kind of try to combo off in a lot of instances and spend 10, 15 minutes trying to do so, sometimes failing, most of the time succeeding. And it's not a fun player experience. And Nexus of Fate creates a very similar play experience here where you're going to see Hal Brady just casting Nexus of Fate over and over again, getting multiple activations of Ascanta, and he's going to eventually win with a thing. And it doesn't even really matter what the thing is. In this instance, he has 3 copies of Depose Deploy left in his deck, which he can use to generate Thopters. But the real win condition is using Teferi with his ultimate to exile all the permanents from Frank Skarren's side of the battlefield. But I bet my life that Frank Skarren is going to concede well before that.
Yeah, and really the reason that Skarren would hang in here is maybe he sees something he doesn't know about off of all of these Ascanta activations. You get the idea for maybe you see multiple Teferi, something like that. Though he's already seen Depose Deploy, which really strongly suggests this build of Bant that we have seen crop up recently.
Right, and this is a deck that I actually heard about this morning. I was pretty busy all week doing Versus Live, and we were focusing on the gauntlet this week of the 3 decks that we thought would see the most standard play, and Reclamation Nexus was not one of them. We thought that these Azorius aggro decks would pop up really highly, as well as the Sultai Crassus decks we've seen dominate in recent weeks. So I'm not very surprised to see this particular build of Bant Nexus dominate like it is right this moment. But I'll say this. This is because Frank Skarren stumbled for so long. Mm-hmm. This is not the actual fault of the Bant Nexus deck. It took him a while to get started. He didn't really do a whole lot in the early turns, but Frank Skarren did less, and as a result, he paid the price.
Yeah, Brady was queuing up some extra turns there, making about 30 mana every turn. Very firmly in the driver's seat. Skarren's seen enough. We're going to be going to game 2 here. Hal Brady up 1.
All right, we're going to have sideboards for you in just a second. You should be able to check those out on Cardboard Live on our extension if you want to take a look at those while we get that set up. But before we do that, I want to talk a little more about this matchup in particular, the dynamic from each side, and how Frank Skarren can actually win the next 2 games. The pre-board games are not very good for Frank, I don't believe, because he has so many of these shocks as well as lava coils and things like that don't really do a whole lot. Additionally, most of his damage is going to come in the form of big chunk attacks with things like Enigma Drake and Crackling Drake, really upping the overall usefulness of the card Root Snare, the fog effect from this Bant Nexus deck. But after sideboard, things change dramatically, and as you see, for Frank Skarren's side, he's got a lot to work with.
Yeah, the sideboard for Skarren, 3 Niv Mizzet Perun, 2 Treasure Map, 2 Shivan Fire, 2 Entrancing Melody, 2 Merfolk Trickster, 2 Disdainful Stroke, and 2 Rattle Is It Viceroy. How big is he going to sideboard here?
So the counterspells come in. Disdainful Stroke, obviously very good. It's going to pair well with those negates in the sideboard. Not 100% on Rattle Is It Viceroy. I think tapping out on turn 5 is a bit dangerous. But it is one of those cards that if your opponent has a weird sideboard plan that involves creatures, having Rattle does double duty. And it looks like that side of the deck is coming in for Hal Brady. We could see upwards of 15 cards coming in from his side of things and just completely change how his deck operates. And a lot of times when you play against a deck as fluid as Izzet Drake's, where they can go from hyper aggro to really slow control, that sideboard plan could really throw him off balance and just steal a game in a match where you might not be favorable post-sideboard. The 3 copies of Niv Mizzet Peyrune, I think, are a pretty easy inclusion. If he had stuck one in those turns at some point, Hal Brady would have taken a lot of damage and given Frank Skarren a lot of cards. And that one turn where he missed on the Nexus of Fate, Frank would have untapped with 8, 9, 10, maybe more cards in hand with Hal Brady at a significantly lower life total. If he does bring in the Nivs and the Rao, I 100% think Treasure Map's going to come in. And it looks like he has enough in his main deck that he doesn't really want, where all of those cards can really come in over those Lava Coils and Shocks.
Yeah, so possibly pretty heavy sideboarding for Skarren. So we look over on Hal Brady's side. We have 4 Negate, 4 Deputy of Detention. That's a cheeky one in this matchup. 3 Amara, Soul of the Accord, 2 Lyra Dawnbringer, and 2 Hydroid Krasis. What looks good here?
So Amara, Soul of the Accord, I think, is the one that really stands out to me. I don't get it. You don't have Conclave Trib, you don't have Venerated Luxodon. It becomes a 2-mana 2/2 that whenever it attacks, you create a 1/1 with lifelink. And honestly, in a Bant Nexus deck against an opposing Bant Nexus deck, that's an insane effect. You generate so much power for just 2 mana that a lot of decks can't really handle. It really plays the role of that Thief of Sanity type card that all of your opponents that are playing Esper or Grixis or what have you are going to have against you. The difference is that yours costs 1 less mana. So I could see that coming in and making a bit of sense there. In this particular matchup, I don't think it comes in. There's a chance that Frank doesn't have enough cards to sideboard in where he actually just has to leave in some number of shocks. And even then, Amara doesn't really attack well into things like Enigma Drake or Crackling Drake, and the removal, quote-unquote, from Hal Brady's deck isn't really traditional removal. It's like Depose on Depose Deploy. It's Revitalize to gain some life to kind of negate those attacks. And Root Snare, a card that just prevents your opponent from attacking. So the cards I do expect to come in. Negate, I think, could play a decent role after sideboard as a means of fighting over something like Wilderness Reclamation. I think Lear Dawnbringer and Hydroid Crassus can both come in as a way to present not only a clock against the Izzet Drake's deck, but also just put up a big flying body that the Izzet Drake's deck kind of has to grind through. So aside from that, if Hal expects Deputy or the removal to be completely gone from Frank's side of things, I think Deputy Detention could be a potentially potent option as well.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes down. I alluded to Hal Brady's deck functioning a lot like a Commander deck. And for you Commander fans out there on this very channel, we recently launched Commander vs. Live every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You can see your favorite personalities from Commander vs. out there. Jeremy Noel, Stephen Green, Justin Parnell.
The other one. No, Jonathan Suarez is the other one that fills out that Commander versus squad. Normally those, in the past we've filmed those beforehand, done some editing, put them on YouTube. Now we film all of them live on twitch.tv/SCGTour, and you can check that out every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also check it out on YouTube, but we'll get to that later.
Commander, an extremely popular format.
Oh, absolutely. It's honestly the lifeblood of Magic, in my opinion. There's so many card stores that function basically just because Commander exists. They really give life to a lot of these older, powerful cards that wouldn't necessarily see play on a normal kitchen tabletop or a Magic tournament.
Yeah, Commander definitely has a very robust marketplace. I know at Lodestone Coffee and Games, we hold Commander Sunday every week. There's a ton of Commander decks out at the store, and they're always buying new cards, trying wacky ideas. They really support us in a very significant way. Really appreciate the Commander players that come out. The casual players are the lifeblood of the LGS.
Sure. I'll say this. I went to an LGS for a very long time when I was in high school and shortly after, and there were a lot of casual players that came in, and they didn't really spend a lot of money.
Not all of them do. Not all of them do.
Commander players, they'll drop a dime on you. Let me get that foil Pattern of Rebirth. That was probably like $200. I don't know.
Something outrageous.
Yeah.
Or is this Destiny foil?
Yeah.
You got any of those foil mana crypts?
Do they come in non-foil?
Yeah. Yeah, there's the way old giveaway one.
The first one was non-foil. It was, I think it came in a book.
Right.
Yeah.
It was the only good promo of that type. There was like 3 other ones that were all terrible.
Yeah, and then they had, I think, maybe like a From the Vault or something.
Yeah, it's in one of the master sets now.
Yeah.
And there's a masterpiece of it.
Yep.
All right, so we're underway with some standard action now. Frank Skarren will start shocking for a Steam Vents. He's at 18. Here's a Terramander. Hal Brady just a tapped Glacial Fortress.
Yeah, and that's not a good sign for Hal Brady. You never want to start off with one of those check lands like Glacial Fortress or Drowned Catacombs as your opening land. You really want to start off, if your land enters the battlefield tapped, with something like Temple Garden.
I was going to say Mana Woes for Frank Skarren, but it's actually both players. No second land drop for either of them. Just going back to Skarren. Terramander did connect. Brady's at 19, and Skarren is the first one to hit the second land drop. There's a mountain.
Speaking of tabletop, you want to draw this game?
Yeah. Can we just go to the next one?
Can we just go to game 3? Let's draw this one.
Terramander connects again. Brady's at 18, and here's a chart of course to draw 2.
Yeah, it looks like Hal Brady here is going to be moving to discard even after mulliganing. Couldn't find that second land to get that Search for Escanta online and fix his draws. Looks like Frank Skarren definitely in the driver's seat here.
Chemistar's Insight, a pretty easy discard there for Brady, though he's got to start hitting those land drops soon as we go back Skarren's way. Pre-combat, he'll start with an Opt, giving that card a look. So you're not going to see any Enigma Drakes this turn, but you can maybe shape up some more lands. And there's a Sulphur Falls, land number 3, and attack with Terramander as well.
Yeah, and of course, every instant and sorcery here for Frank Skarren's side of things is going to push that Pteramander further and further along and turn it into one of those significant 5/5 threats.
Brady has to discard again. Skarren will take this opportunity to cast another Opt. Root Snare discarded for Brady as we go back Skarren's way.
I really wish that this game was in the time-shifted match so we could fast-forward through it, because if this Bant Nexus deck ever stumbles this bad, it doesn't play normal Magic. This game is over. It's just going to take 2 or 3 more turns for Frank Skarren to actually close it. But now with that Enigma Drake, he's going to put Hal out of his misery here a bit quicker. And if he has something like Negate or Disdainful Stroke on backup, there's a chance that the game's over right now.
Brady found a second land, but it was a Sun Petal Grove, so it's not going to be of consequence this turn. So go back Skarren's way. He has deployed an Enigma Drake and is going to use Discovery pre-combat here, maybe try to put some instants and sorceries in the graveyard.
I'll tell you this, as a man who really likes experimentation with 3-color mana bases, only playing one basic feels like a mistake, and Hal Brady here has 1 island, which means he has a huge emphasis on these breeding pools, Hallowed Fountains, Temple Gardens, and all the check lands.
Yeah, so it looks like we had a judge call there. I caught it briefly. It looked like Skarren touched his discovery cards to his hand. Obviously, they're not supposed to be there. Yep. Mixing zones is kind of weird. But, we had this on tape, and I want to say it was 2 lands, and we know Skarren's been missing land drops.
I was busy looking down at Hal Brady's mana base, so forgive me.
Yeah. Well, we'll let the judges do their job, though. Yeah, That's not really our spot to resolve that anyway.
Yeah. So let's talk about I want to talk about mana bases a little bit.
Sure.
I was getting into this while Frank Skarren's basically closing up this game. Even if there's a severe penalty, as long as it's not a game loss, this game's over.
Yeah.
Hal Brady missed too many land drops. And you see, even though he was able to finally draw a second land, still entered the battlefield tapped. With lands like Glacial Fortress, Sun Petal Grove, this cycle of lands that all need your other land to be an island or plains or what have you. There are a lot of draws that your first 2, sometimes 3, even 4 lands all enter the battlefield tapped. It's not good deck building, especially against aggressive decks. You really need to have some of your first few lands enter the battlefield untapped, and basic lands are a great way to do that. I think only playing 1 island to me is a bit greedy, and I think that anyone who builds their mana base in such a way is going to get punished at some point. For me, building your mana base is all about a few things. But first, the first thing you want to think about when you're building your mana base is, does the mana base fit the spells? And can the spells fit the mana base? You have to basically have this balance where, there has to be a give and take at some point. Playing islands in your deck with Kaya's Wrath and Absorb means you can more reliably cast Absorb on turn 3. But it also means that you're less likely to cast Kaya's Wrath on turn 4. That actually came up last round when we were watching Andrew Davis play his Esper Control deck. And in the same vein of things, though, in my perspective, when I'm trying to build a 3-color mana base, especially in the standard format, my goal is to play as many basic lands as I can get away with. Because every time I don't have to take 2 damage for my land is another game against mono red where I don't lose because I have that extra point of life. Every time one of my lands enters the battlefield untapped, that's another game I win because I didn't stumble on turn 2 or 3. With that said, there is a healthy mixture, a healthy balance that needs to be kept, especially if you're going to stretch your mana a bit by playing a hard 3 colors. And when I say hard 3 colors, I specifically mean your deck is on average, 3 full colors. This Bant deck has Growth Spiral, Root Snare, and Wilderness Reclamation. That's 12 green spells. That's quite a bit, and usually that's a full third of your 36 colored cards. So you just have to find the balance, and with only 1 island, I cannot imagine that there is not some room for exploration.
Sure. So we have a resolution with our judge call here. So they have really revised the drawing extra cards, how that is assessed in game state situations. So it's a thing now where you get to look at cards that have been in the mixed zones, and then we will be seeing Hale select the 2 cards that are supposed to be discoveried right now.
Sure.
And then they'll progress play from there. So let's get back down to the match and see how we progress from here. Maybe Hale Brady can salvage this one, but it does look really bad from when we cut away.
Yeah, and I think this is the most fair way to resolve an infraction like this. If there is any, in my opinion, if there's any advantage to be gained from, having kind of like a looting effect with something like your Discovery Dispersals, the opponent being able to pick the two that become those two Discovery Dispersal cards, I think, is a pretty huge deal.
Severe upgrade, I think, to tournament policy over formerly that being a game loss. I think that just generated really unfortunate circumstances.
Oh, absolutely agree. And I mean, I'm whenever Ross and I play on Versus Live every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m., pretty regularly when we cast a card like Discovery, we hold the two cards really close to the rest of our hand in order to show it to the camera. And while Frank Skarren doesn't play Versus Live, I can't imagine that he doesn't have someone on his team birding him pretty regularly, and he wants them to see the two cards without showing them to his opponent. And in this instance, they just lightly tipped his hand, but luckily he's so far ahead that it shouldn't matter too much.
Couple swings in the game. Skarren connected with the Enigma Drake and the Pteramander. Brady went to 10, and in his turn he shocked to 8 for Deputy Detention. That took care of the Enigma Drake, though. Now Skarren has deployed a Crackling Drake in a 5th land. Pteramander is going to connect for 1, Brady to 7. Something like Wilderness Reclamation into Root Snare, provided he doesn't get Spell Pierced, could turn things his way.
Yeah, I mean, and even here, this second Deputy Detention might give him life for another turn.
Yeah, Crackling Drake now under that Deputy as we go back Skarren's way.
The problem here is that it's not really, even though it's dealing with the problem at hand, it's not really pushing Hal Brady towards doing the things that his deck is built to do. Frank Skarren here, he's losing his creature, but he plays enough protection and he plays enough overall threats and filtering and things like that. He'll be able to find another threat.
Yeah, Pteramander knocked Brady to 6. And speaking of another threat, here's Niv Mizzet.
Woo, 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 woo.
And that's going to be game number 2 here. Skarren ties things up.
I don't remember his name, but sometimes I kind of feel like the guy from Police Academy that does all the...
Oh, yeah.
the
I know
sound
you're
effects.
talking. I'm blanking on his name as well.
Anyway, let's take a look at the sideboards again to see if Hal Brady wants to go back to the well and change anything. We saw Deputy Detention, which means he brought those in. Curious if he keeps them in. They were able to contain those threats in Game 2, but didn't really progress, didn't really mesh with the rest of his game plan, and along with that early stumble, just fell apart.
It's a really interesting song and dance with Deputy, right? We saw a game there where Brady stumbled on lands a lot.
Right.
When he finally got the lands, the deputies, they did some work. You can kind of imagine the deputies being very good, say, if both players were keeping pace on mana, if he had some more life when he actually got them online. And
no, go ahead.
yeah, on Skarren's side, the lava coils are just so bad otherwise. There's an argument maybe you want to bring him back in, but they're just poor enough that I don't expect him to.
I'll tell you this. The Izzet Drake's deck can fight through traditional spot removal. If Hal is unable to utilize the body on Deputy Detention, it literally just becomes Detention Sphere. Mm-hmm. And as long as Frank just plays around the duplicate effect where he steals multiple creatures, I think he should be able to fight through this quite easily. His life total is going to be high for the most part throughout the entire game, and Deputy Detention's body doesn't fly, and it shouldn't matter all that much. And I think he just doesn't want to have dead cards in his hand, and there's a chance Hal Brady just sides them back out right now.
Right. You think Skarren might want 1 or 2 dive down?
I mean, we saw he still had 1 dive down at least left in his deck. One got put into the graveyard off of that Discovery Dispersal. So
yeah.
I'm curious. I mean, he definitely wants to route Izzet Viceroys, right? And those play double duty in being able to take down Lear Dawnbringer as well as the Deputy Detention.
So if you're enjoying this match or coverage this weekend, we do eventually post all of our tournament matches here on our YouTube page, as well as Versus Live, Commander Versus, Flashback, all the matches from the best of the SCG Tour, and so much more. Just a ton of content there at youtube.com/StarCityGames.
Yeah, if you have a desk job where you do some mindless data entry like I used to do, having this much Magic content at your disposal is a 21-year-old me's dream. And the fact that I didn't have this back in the day is really makes me kind of jealous. So make sure to head over to youtube.com/StarCityGames where you can watch all of this and more.
Really great content to watch, and we would really appreciate it if you'd subscribe.
Yeah, it doesn't cost you a thing. Just hit that subscribe button, and whenever we have a new video up, you'll get a little message whenever you go to YouTube that says, hey, there's a new thing for you to watch. Come watch.
And we are underway. Game 3. Hal Brady on the play. Breeding Pool tap. Frank Skarren once again. Basic Island and Pteramander.
Yeah, let's see if he has the Chart of Course here and how he uses it.
Hinterland Harbor on turn 2 for Brady. So just blue and green mana so far. We'll see what the follow-up is for Skarren. He'll start by shocking for Steam Vents. He's at 18. Here's an attack for Terramander. Sure feels like a Chart a Course, though it could be a Spell Pierce or a Negate.
Nah, we're doing something for 2 full mana. I don't know what it is yet. Looks like it's going to be Discovery.
I like the pre-combat shock. Maybe you could have incentivized his Hail to tap the Terramander or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's actually really smart. In my head, I was like, well, Frank probably has Negate as well as Chart a Course and wants to potentially negate something, but also just cast Chart a Course post-combat. But that pre-combat shock kind of sets up a potential Chart a Course, and if Hal had it, he probably would have burned that Depose Deploy there just to prevent a single point of damage.
Niv Mizzet hit the bin off that Discovery, and then on Hale's side, misses the 3rd land drop. So he's in trouble. Terramander just connected a couple times. Brady at 18.
Yeah, and you say he's in trouble. He's not in bad shape because the Terramander is still just a 1/1. Frank Skarren, one of the cards he put in the graveyard was a creature, so and the second one's also a creature. So he's pushing closer to the Terramander, but he's still not that close.
Yeah, Discovery has now milled 2 Niv Mizzets on Skarren's side. Brady is going to have to discard this time. Yeah, Nexus of Fate was the discard.
That was the saddest shuffling out of Nexus of Fate that you can have. A turn 4 move to discard. And we're seeing the woes, the mana woes really come out to play for Hal Brady. Not really a whole lot going on. His sideboard plan featuring these W detentions, things like that. And they might be able to catch him up, though, if he's able to draw a few white producing mana lands off the top.
Opt was fired off end step for Skarren. He'll begin his turn by attacking for 1 again with the Terramander. Brady to 17, and looks like Enigma Drake will be the follow-up in the second main phase. No 4th land, so no dive down. Maybe Brady could do something with the Deputy here.
Yeah, I feel real bad for Hal Brady here, and this is something that you just can't control sometimes. You keep a hand that's got two mana and like a bunch of stuff to do if you hit your 3rd, and unfortunately for Hal, just can't find that 3rd one to really get the ball rolling. And Frank Skarren's deck, able to operate on such a small amount of mana, is able to capitalize on this stumble from him 2 games in a row.
Yeah, second turn of discarding for Brady. Wilderness Reclamation hit the bin. On Skarren's side, shocked for a Blood Crypt to 16, played Crackling Drake, came across, Brady to 13, and Brady has seen enough, once again missing that 3rd land drop.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot you can do in that spot other than potentially mulligan before the game, but once you keep, it's all up to the mana god.